Okay, so on this section, we're going to talk about namespaces and modules. And they are kind of a very related. If we go to the handbook, we can see them right here and notice that they are kind of on the same spot. And then we have a special place, which is namespace and modules. So they are very related. Now, if you come from ES6, you kind of already know what modules are. Maybe you don't know they called modules, but don't worry, I'm going to show you in a minute. So we get modules and namespaces. So modules are much more from ES6 side of things, and namespaces are from from TypeScript only. So we just achieve the same purpose with both. So you will use namespaces and modules, or you will use modules only, or just namespaces only. Of course, I'm going to show you how to use them. I'm going to go to the previous project. I'm still using the previous project. I'm going to delete all of this. We kind of don't need it. And I'm going to delete the JavaScript file, the JavaScript directory, the second JavaScript directory. Just going to delete this. Going to move to trash. And I'm going to change the configuration. I want to compile everything to the same spot. So if I save it, this is going to detect the change and it will create the app.js and the map. I kind of don't need the map right now. And I'm going to remove the source map. And I'm going to delete these ones because we don't need them. They're just kind of in the way. You should do the same. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the JavaScript directory and I'm going to create a new file, a new TypeScript file. So I'm going to go right here and I'm going to call it utils.ts. So now in our application, we will have two TypeScript files. Is it still compiling because, we get the watcher, but that's okay. So on the TS file, I'm going to do the following. And I know this is going to look very familiar to you. I'm going to export a const that is going to be called bark. And this one is going to be like arg, or wow, wow, or whatever you call this in your country. Every country has its own way of doing these noises. So the other one is going to be speak. And speak is just going to be a function that we are exporting. And I'm going to return something like, I don't know, hello friends, something like that. So we get two things. We get a variable that it's with a value, and we get a function, and we are exporting them. So we know that if we export variables or functions or whatever, we can import them from different files. So if I go right here, kind of makes sense that we're gonna do a little bit of destructuring, and we're gonna import the speak and the bark. And I know again this is very familiar to you because we do it all the time. So this is modules. We are importing something from a different file, right? This is modules. So I'm going to do the console log, and I'm going to console log bark, and then I'm going to console log whatever we get back from speak. All right, again, let me just fix it. Doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter. It's a function, it doesn't matter. So we're kind of trying to import from the files we are exporting. So again, we know that this works. This is pretty easy because we are used to use ES6 and we do it all the time. Now the thing is that this does not work. All right, so again, if I save this, TypeScript, it's compiling and we're gonna get one version of the app.js and then another version of the utils.js. So we have two JavaScript files. If you go right here, I'm gonna change this. I'm gonna just pass the app.js. And this is what we do in real life. We just provide a single file, everything that's bundled. So on this one, it's actually calling this import. So if you go to our application, I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna reload the application, and we're gonna say exports. It's not defined. So the compilation, everything that's it's getting compiled on from the TypeScript file is gonna go to the app.js. And notice that right here we get an export. Now, remember that this is getting compiled to ES5, and ES5 has no idea what an export and an import is. And that's why we get an error. It's not able to do it because, it has no support for doing modules by default. This is something more of ES6. And we achieve this by compiling everything. Now, if you know how to use Webpack, you know that Webpack use a loader to do this in this example. And we're going to get to Webpack later. We're going to learn how to do this with Webpack. But this is what we want to do. We want to be able to use modules, right, to export and import things We want to add support to our application, and then we're going to use namespaces. And namespaces, again, it's just like using modules, but a little bit different. Actually, much different. So I'm going to show you both ways, and we're going to start with namespaces because it's a much more simple thing to do and understand, because they come built in with TypeScript. Since we don't have support for modules, just with the default of TypeScript, we need to install a couple more things, do a little bit more configuration. So we need to do a few things. So we're going to start with namespaces on the next section, and then we're going to go with modules. And at the beginning, it's going to be a little bit overwhelming, at least with modules. But again, don't worry, because we are kind of manually doing everything. In real life, when you create a project, you're going to do it with React or maybe with Webpack, and everything is going to get much easier with Webpack, for example. So don't worry, again, you just keep moving forward. We're going to go to namespaces and then with modules. Okay, so we're going to start with namespaces, and they are a little bit weird to understand, but they're really simple. Once you get it, it's pretty simple. So I'm going to show you in a much more simple way. I'm going to go to the app.ts. I'm going to delete everything that was inside of there, and I'm going to copy everything that was inside utils. For now, we're going to handle everything on a single file. So when we compile the app.js, we can actually see it on the screen. So right here, I'm just exporting, I'm doing the same thing I was doing on the utils, exporting the bark and exporting the speak. That's it. Okay, so what is the nature of namespaces? So a namespace is just like an object. It's kind of an object where we create an alias. Again, it sounds confusing, but it's actually pretty simple. So since this is like an object, it kind of makes sense that everything that we have right here, we put it inside of something. So we started with the keyword namespace. So we're going to do namespace. Then we need to assign kind of an ID, an alias. So in this case, since I got sounds right here, I'm going to call it my sounds. And we kind of start an object. Now, everything that you want to put inside of the namespace, you're going to put it inside of the object. That's it. And there you go. You get a namespace. Okay, so how can we use this? Inside of my sounds namespace, I got pretty much two things. I got a bark, which is a const, variable, and then I have a function. So if I want to gain access to both things, I can do console log, and I need to access bark. So since we're using an alias, we need to use this like an object. First, I'm going to make a reference to my sounds, and then I'm going to do bark. Same thing with the other one. Since this is a function, I'm going to say speak, and I'm going to trigger that function. But we always access this like an object. If I go to the compiler, we can see that they are, compiling. So it's pretty cool, pretty simple to use. So of course we are doing everything in a single file. I'm going to show you in a couple minutes how to export all of this. But I got to tell you, some things you need to take into account if you use namespaces. Right now, of course, we are creating the namespace. We give it a name and two things. Now, notice that I'm still exporting the variable and the function. If I remove this one, if I remove the export, this namespace, this variable, this will not work. We always need to export something, right? We always need to export it. If we don't export it, it's not working. Now, what is the main point of, having a namespace? So again, this is just works like an object. So we can create complex operations right here, like a complex function or a complex object, and we can even use some of the things we have right here. So for example, if I want to return whatever I get on this const that it's not being exported, I can do it right here. And if I go, we get our R. So, we can create really complex objects. This is the main point of a namespace. Now, there's a couple of things that you need to take into account is that you can export a namespace that it's inside of a namespace. Right now, I just get a variable and I'm doing an export of a function, right? That's the only thing I'm doing. When I'm going to go right here, I'm going to create a new namespace, and this one is going to be human because, this sounds, it's from a human. And I'm going to export something else that is going to, talk loud, whatever, it doesn't matter. Let me do it correct. Loud. So, notice that right now the speak function is not available anymore. Now, what I want to do, I want to go to the human because it's inside my sound. So I'm going to go my sounds, I'm going to make a reference to human, and then I want to make a reference to speak. Now notice that again, we are kind of getting an error message. We're getting an error. And it's because we have a namespace inside of a namespace, but if you remember, I've told you that everything we put in my sounds inside the main namespace, if we want to use them outside, we need to export it. So on this one, we will need to do the same. We need to export it, and that is going to pass. So if you go right here, we get TalCloud. So, pretty cool. It's like with the namespace, we can create a pretty complex object that we can use it from outside. We can use it multiple times, just like a global object. Of course, right now we are using it on the same file. This is not the main point. This is not what we want to do. We want to be able to grab all of this, put it on utils, and import it on maybe the app.ts. And this is when everything gets a little bit, weird. So let's go to the next section and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how to export and import namespaces, the same thing we want to do with modules. Later, after the section, we're going to talk about modules. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm gonna go right here to the app.ts, and I'm going to export these two things, the bark and the human. And I'm going to copy all this, going to chop it, and I'm going to put it on utils. So what I want to do, I want to use this bark and the human and then the speak function, but I want to trigger them from within this file. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to put everything on the utils. I'm going to not trigger from here, and I'm going to go right here and say I want to do that bark. Okay, so of course, this kind of makes sense. Now, what we want to do, of course, we are compiling, and we are applying, compiling the utils.ts, and it's compiling the app.ts, and we can see it right here. Now, if on our application, we are still doing, just making a reference to the app.js. Now, in terms of compilation, how to make namespaces work, we get three ways pretty much. So the first one kind of sucks. All of this version sucks. Everything is going to be better when we use Webpack. But the first version, the first thing we can do with this, the first way of importing and using these files, it's by manually adding a script. For example, if I go right here to the application, I'm going to reload it, and it says my sounds, it's not defined. And it kind of makes sense. Notice that there's no relation here whatsoever. And the only thing we are feeding to the HTML is this /app.js. So the only thing that is reading is this ones, with the console log, bark, and the human. But of course, it has no idea what my sounds is because there is no reference right here. So the first way of fixing this is just to add another script right here. In this case, I need to put it first. So I'm going to go right here, and instead of feeding the app, I'm going to pass the utils.js. And if we go to the application, this works. Now, what is the downside with this? Well, if we have 10 files, we need to put the 10 files. We need to put the scripts of the 10 files right here. So yeah, I know, it sucks. No one will use it this way. I get it. So, this is the downside of this method. Then we get a second way of doing things. Okay, so what is the second way of doing things? First, I'm going to delete that. And what we're going to do, we're going to bundle all the files, all of this TypeScript files, actually the JavaScript files, into a single file, which is going to be the app.js. And that's what you want to do in real life. You don't make a mention to all the JavaScript files you have. You just bundle everything into a single file. That's how it works. Now we get, of course, different ways of doing this. Now the one that's actually on the docs and you can find on the web is by creating a bundle right here that will kind of bundle everything into one, but you need to kind of manually do it. So let me show you just this way. I'm going to go right here to the terminal. Let me make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to do a clear. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to say, okay, I want to run the compiler, and I want to modify what's going to come out on the out file. And if you get an option, notice that you will get an option right here. So what I want to do, I want to say, okay, I want to compile everything on a file that is going to be called source.js and then /app.js, which is going to be pretty much this one we have right here. So we're going to compile everything here. Now, the other things we're going to put right there is which files we want to compile. Well, we want to compile the TS and the utils TS into a single file, which is going to be this one. I know everything still sucks. It's going to get better in a minute. So we need to go and do the utils.js, and then we need to compile the source src/js/app.ts. So if I press enter, everything is going to go good, and it says, of course, this is because I made a mistake. Let me fix it. We need to pass after the first is the TypeScript file. I was passing the JavaScript file. All right, so it should work right now. So if you run it, we get no errors. And notice that the app.js, the one we are feeding to the HTML, it's really different. It's putting all the logic into one single file. And if we go to the application, it works. We get the app.ts right here, so we are able to make it work. Of course, again, if you're thinking, dude, this sucks, what happens if we have 10 TypeScript files? We need to type them here. Yeah, you will need to do something like that. Sorry. But yeah, that's the second way of doing things. So let me show you the third way of doing this. Okay, so what is the third way? Well, if you check the docs, of course, you're going to get an example of this. What we get is a way to reference different files on a single file. So let me go and show you. It's going to be a little bit weird, but that's the way it works. So if we do 1/2, we know that this is a comment. If we add a third one, TypeScript knows that we want to add a reference. So for this one, we need to add a tag. So I need to do a reference, something like this, open and close. Let me do it this way. Reference, I'm going to open and close. And the reference is going to be path equals, and then we need to be passing, and notice that the color changes. We need to be passing the file that we want to include. And this one works just like an import something from something. The same idea with modules. And on this one, we want to import the utils.ts. And notice that we get no errors. TypeScript, it's not complaining. Now, in this one, what it's going to do is going to, link this file with this file. So we're going to be able to use this one. Now, we are still getting some problems with this. I'm going to do clear, and I'm going to run the tsc ---- watch. It's going to do the compilation. It's not going to complain. And, it's going to create an app.js and utils and everything else. But notice that if I go to the app.js, it's adding this. And, this is not valid ES5. So that's why we are still getting the same error. So what we still need to do is to tell the compiler that we want to bundle everything into one app.js. So there is no import because this one knows nothing about imports, the ES5, the browser. So we still need to provide that rule. So what are we going to do? Well, pretty much the same thing we did previously, but it's a little bit better. We need to do tsc out file, and then we need to say, okay, I want to bundle everything into JavaScript and source JavaScript and then app.js. And what I want to compile is going to be the source JavaScript /app.ts and nothing else. You just need to provide two rules. What is going to come out and which one is going to come in, which is the TypeScript file. Now, since on this one, we are making a reference when we compile, TypeScript is going to say, oh, okay, so well, he's importing this one, so I'm going to include this code into this bundle. So if I run something like this, it's going to do it, and we're going to get pretty much the same result, the same result than before, and this is going to work. So this is the third way of doing this. Now, again, it's still a little bit annoying. So if you ask me how many times I use modules, well, almost never. I'm a pretty big ES6 user, so I use modules the whole time. Why changing that? And it works perfect. Why using namespaces? But again, if you want to use namespaces and you like them, you can use them. You can use them this way. You can use namespaces and then make sure you configure the out file to bundle everything into one. Now, remember that with the Webpack, everything is going to get easier. Now, we are pretty much done with this, right? This is what we can do. There's not much we can do with this one. We're going to go with modules, which is what, most likely what you're going to use in real life. So let's go to the next section and start with modules. Okay, so now in this section we're going to talk about modules. But first I can need to create a valid example. So I'm going to go and delete the namespaces. I'm going to delete the export for the bark, and I'm going to delete this one as well. And I'm just going to export the function and the speak, right? The function and the const. And now I'm going to again delete all of this. I'm going to delete the TS files. I'm going to delete this ones. By the way, notice I'm not running the TSC, the compiler. And I'm going to go and create a new file. I'm going to create a utils, maybe _.2.ts. Doesn't matter. So on this one, I'm going to pretty much do the same thing here. What I want to do, I want to import on this file whatever we have on this, two files. And on this one, I'm just going to export just a const called, I don't know, wild, something like that. And then I'm going to say maybe roar. Why not? Roar, with a capital R. Okay, so now we have two variables and we get pretty much two files and one function. Now what we need to do, we need to import them right here. That's what we do whenever we use modules. So we're gonna try to do that and see what happens, and then take it from there. So we want to import the bark, and we want to import speak, and we want to do it from, and then we do it from / and utils. All right, seems nice. Then we have another one, and the other one, it's going to be the wild we have on the other file, and this one is going to be on utils too, right? We know that this should be working. Now, if I do const log bark, we should be getting the bark. If I do const log speak, we should be getting speak. And then we have a new one, which is the wild. So I'm going to do console log, and I'm going to console log the wild. All right. So of course, if we run the TSC with the -- watch, this will not happen. What it's going to do is going to go and try to compile all the TS files, and we're going to see one JavaScript file for each TS file. And, that's good. That's what it's supposed to be doing. All right. So we get the three files, and if you remember right now, we are only using the app.js. So, okay, again, if we go to localhost 3000, we can see again the same error we got before. Exports, it's not defined. And it's because we are fitting to the HTML just the app.js, which is this one, and it's trying to export things, and of course, we know that that doesn't work. Now, let me just show you the documentation. If we go here, and if we go to modules, we can see, if we scroll down, that you have a section that says, let me just find it first. There we go. Oh, there we go. Code generation for modules. And it says depending on the module, depending on what you're doing, you can use require, AMD, or SystemJS. So right here, they are kind of pretty much telling us, dude, we cannot support what you will normally try to do, which is use imports. So by default, we don't have any kind of support. The first problem that we get is that we are compiling everything to different files. And in the index.html, we are just, fitting one. So we are not going to put many scripts right here. What I want to do, I want to compile these three files into one file. And we can actually do that. We kind of did it before. We're going to run the command. Let me just do Control-C. I'm going to do clear. And I'm going to run the TSC, and I'm going to set the out file. The same out file we did before. I'm going to say, okay, so I want to go to src JS, and then I want to do an app.js. So basically, we are telling that we want to compile all the TS files and create a bundle called app.js that we can store right here. So if I run this, it's going to go, and we're going to get an error. And this is good. I was expecting this. And it says only AMD and system modules are supported without file. So if it's kind of detecting that we are trying to use modules, and it says, dude, we don't have support for that. If you want support, you need to use AMD or system. Now, this is the way TypeScript works. If you go to the tsconfig, under the compiler options, we get the module right here, notice. And it says CommonJS. So whenever we compile everything, we are compiling in CommonJS, to ES5. But again, since we don't have support, which is CommonJS, we need to use something else. And they give us the option to use AMD or use system. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to put AMD just to see what happens. I'm going to save it and notice what we have right here. So now I'm going to run the compiler again. I'm going to run it and it's not going to complain. We don't get an error, but the file looks really, really weird. And it's because we are setting it to AMD. But at least it's compiling. Now the problem is that the browser cannot understand this code, cannot understand this AMD code. So we cannot really use AMD, we cannot use it. So for this one, we need to do an additional step. We need to install a library that will help us to compile and to allow the application to read those kind of imports. So I'm going to go to the browser and I'm going to look for what we need to install. And this is going to be called SystemJS. So if we put SystemJS on the browser, we're going to get it on GitHub, and I'm going to look it on npm. So there we go, SystemJS npm. And this is just a library that we will need to install and to use it on the HTML. We cannot just install it with npm and use it as an import, because again, we don't have support for imports. We kind of need to do it on a different way. So this is what we need to use. It's on right now they are on the version 4.1.0. All right, that's okay. So I'm going to go and they're going to do clear, and you should do the same if you wish. If you don't want to do it, that's okay. I'm going to do install. I'm going to install it. Minus save. And I'm going to do SystemJS, and I'm going to install that version because maybe you're watching this in the future, so you should install the same version than me. I'm not going to install this one because this one is new. I believe they updated the version a couple days ago. This is the version I'm going to install. You should install this one. And they keep changing things on different versions, so you should use the 4.0.2. Alright, so I'm going to press enter, and whenever this is done, I'll be right back. Oh, okay, well, it was really fast, so that's okay. I'm going to do clear. Now what we need to do, first we need to remove the AMD, and we need to say system. That's the first step. Okay, so then, since everything is installed in Node modules, we kind of get it right here. What we need to do, we need to import it just like a regular script. So I'm going to go right here at the top, and I'm going to put script, just going to copy paste. And since I'm using Node modules, I'm going to make a reference to Node modules. And notice that this is just a JavaScript library. You can download and put it on your JS files, and then just make a reference to your directory. That's it. I'm just going to show you how to use it. So it's SystemJS dist, and then SystemJS. This is the import. Now, then of course we are importing the app, but this is not the way we kind of need to do it. Now we are importing the regular way, but now we need to use this system.js. So with this one, what we can do, we can include it in some script widths that it's built in on SystemJS. And we can tell this JavaScript that we want to load this file, and we want for SystemJS to handle all the logic we get with the imports. So, okay, so I'm going to go right here. Let me just show you. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to open a script at the end. All right. So I'm going to go and I'm going to say, first, I'm going to say system, just like this. And then I'm going to use the import. So the import needs to know which file we want to import right here. Which file we want to use. In this case, we want to use this one because this one is going to be the bundle. All right. So I'm going to do it like this. And I believe I kind of need to do this. All right. Okay. So now what we need to do, we just, need to compile. We're going to get a few errors, but then I'm going to tell you how to fix it. And I'm just going to run the TSC file, the TSC compiler, right? No out file, no nothing. All right. So I'm going to press enter. That's going to do the compilation. And on the app.js, we're going to get the system now. We get a different format. Now, if we go to our application, we are still getting errors, but these are different errors. They are good errors. So it's pretty pretty much saying that it cannot find the utils file. So it's trying to do the import, it's kind of trying to do it, but it cannot find the file. And notice that right here, what it's missing, it's the extension. And this is what SystemJS cannot do. Cannot recognize which extension you're using. Now, what we need to do in this case, we need to provide .js and then .js right here. I know it sucks. Don't worry, this will get much better. So I'm gonna run the TSC. Again, it's going to do the compile, and now we get the console logs. So this is the way you get to use modules with just JavaScript and SystemJS. Now, on previous versions of SystemJS, maybe the version number 3 or something like that, we were able to pass kind of a promise right here, and we were able to tell the SystemJS that whenever it's trying to find a file, it's going to be .js. So we had a way to set this configuration beforehand. Now they moved to a different version, which is the 4, and we are not able to do it. We don't have that support. A lot of people, it's complaining, but that's fine. So again, I know that you're saying, dude, putting the JS right here, doing the systems, it sucks. Yeah, it just it sucks just a little bit. Now, just like I told before, on real life, you're not just maybe going to do a single, just like a standard or, kind of a raw application. You will use something else to create a bundle and to, to pretty much compile your application. And you're going to use Webpack, or maybe if you use React, you use the built-in Webpack from React and everything else. So, you're going to use it, you're going to use that. And whenever we use Webpack or React, we get much more support for doing all of this, and we don't need to do anything of this.